Hey everybody, Easy Mode here, and I'm coming at you with another build that I made in Path of Exile 2 Early Access, patch 0.1.1, and that is a Attribute Stacker. You may have heard in some of my videos, I'm pouring my money into an Attribute Stacker because that is my Pinnacle boss killer, and it pretty much is. I use it to kill Pinnacle bosses, while I have my other characters that I enjoy mapping with, just go around zipping around with maps. He can do pretty much all the hardest content in the game, and he's the one that I'm pouring a lot of money into so I can just make it easier to do all the hardest content in the game. You'll notice here I say no Adorned, just basic jewels, and that's because I was farming trialmaster this weekend and I was able to get a couple of Adorned jewels, and I got a really good one, like a 93%er, and it kind of changed my build up to do more damage. But by all means, you don't need an Adorned to do that. To do the type of damage you'll see here, I'm doing relatively fine damage killing this trialmaster, and that's without the Adorned. That's just with your basic setup with ingenuity belt as well as some rings. And like, all honesty, you don't even need ingenuity belt to be able to do Pinnacle bosses. You can actually start this build up with just a pillar of the cage god and work your way to getting a hand of wisdom, to then work your way to getting a black crest sun helmet, and then work your way to getting Mortis Invictus chest piece. And you can continually add on to the build with items that will make you stronger, 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 stronger until you get to the point where you are pretty much like killing a boss in like 5 to 10 seconds. You'll see that my build is a little bit different than other attribute stackers. I use Ice Strike as my primary skill with Tempest spell instead of using I think Tempest Flurry, the one where you like kind of swing your staff around like crazy with charge staff and Tempest spell. A lot of those builds are focusing on int and dex instead of strength. I am focusing on strength. I want to make my character tanky, which has made some decisions for this build for me, and it's kind of led me into where I want to go with this particular build, because I wanted to be tanky. I didn't want to be fragile like some of my other characters are. I wanted to be able to make a mistake in a fight, either let it not be a one shot, so on and so forth, and I'd be able to recover from that mistake. So at one point on this build, before I did some changes to meet with the Adorned, I was sending out like 9k HP, 8k HP, and I'll go over that with you relatively soon when I talk about the items I had and the item choices I had, as well as a lot of the ascendancy choices that I had. So without further ado, let's get into talking about the build. So right out the get-go here, we have my character, and you'll see its stats. It's got about like 900-ish, 950-ish strength, 450 dex, as well as 430 intelligence, and this is just a combination of all of my items coming together in play when it comes to these stats. At one point, I was like in the 200s for my dex, as well as 200 in int, and I just been making sure that I put a little bit more emphasis on dex and ints, because that is where I'm getting most of my damage from due to these gloves and due to some passive tree allocations that I've done on the tree. But yeah, this is my character's level 94. You'll also notice that I have about like almost 7k HP. At one point I had like 9k HP. I have about like almost 650 regen per second, so I can regen relatively quickly back my HP in a fight. And you'll notice that my max res is really high. I'm like an 85% max res, 84, and that's because I made some choices in my character tree here, a little bit different from everybody else, and I'll just get right into it with my passive tree. So first things first, I don't use mana. I got rid of advanced thaumaturgy early on. It gives you quality as your skills, as well as reduce the cost of your skills. So like with inspiration, with this, your Ice Strike, whatever your main move, didn't really cost a lot, but I still had issues with like doing bosses and obtaining my mana because I was dropping bells so fast, I was attacking so fast, so on and so forth, that I opted in to go into blood magic. And by going into blood magic, I kind of resolved my issue with sustaining as well as recovery, because now I utilize my HP to sustain, but I also have a lot of recovery with my life regen, and that opens up my ascendancy nodes here to go into integrity efficiency as well as Thaumaturgical Infusion. This is where my tankiness comes into, because now I can get a lot of max resistances for support gems. To kind of give you a preview what the gems look like, these are all my gems. Looks a little scary at first, but when we get to the gem section, I'll kind of break it down what you really need to know. but this just gives me an ability to get more max resistances. So now I'm looking at almost capping my max resistances. I mean, you got a couple more here and there if I really wanted to focus on that, but I feel like 84, 85 is good when it comes to this particular build. I was at like 82, 81 without the Adorned. That was my original resistances. If I take it off, let's see. Is he? 84, 83. But if that's the case, like I was at 80, like yeah, I was at 82, 81 because I didn't even utilize these extra slots down here. So I was literally walking around with like 3 or 4 or 5 slots not used while utilizing this. But it helps a lot that this particular build becomes very tanky because of these choices I've made. You also notice that every Gemling Legionnaire is going to have these 2 nodes here, adaptive capability as well as enhanced efficiency. This what makes the build. This allows you to double your attributes. This is probably going to get nerfed next patch, but I mean, this is what makes it an attribute stacker. Outside of the tree itself here, I just path towards attributes, jewel sockets, attributes, jewel sockets. My tree has not changed, even getting an Adorned. I'll just reiterate that. I had this tree like this, and all I did was insert the Adorned here and just replace all my jewel sockets. And that's because on my jewels, I was focusing on getting stats on them. So these jewels are really basic. I didn't really look for crazy jewels. All I did was look for life regen plus rage on hit. Everything else to me doesn't matter. No, I had a +1 life mana kill when I was trying to deal with my mana. I don't even really need that anymore. You know, so on and so forth. Like all these jewels are just your basic jewels with life regen, with maybe some global fizz, rage on hit, and I want them to give me attributes because ultimately the attributes scale with my percentages, with my helmet, scales with my chest piece, scales with my anoint that I anointed here, and that gives me more and more attributes to give me more and more damage. And as you'll notice when I was showing you the video earlier, even without the Adorned setup, this is what I was wearing. I also utilized Grand Spectrums to increase my HP. That's how I was able to get to 9k in this particular build, because I used 3 Grand Spectrums to increase my HP by 2%. These were pricey. They were like 2 divs a pop, I think. I think I argued a guy down to like a div when I was trying to buy these. But again, you'll notice I went for strength on these guys. I wanted to put more attributes on this, and that's primarily what you want to do on this build, is to get additional attributes on top of what these jewels are. And that's why my tree didn't really change when an Adorned dropped for me. I was just like, oh cool, an Adorned. Slot it in, took out all my jewels, and then just slot in blue jewels that were corrupted with the same thing. So I got like attributes here, you know, so on and so forth. One thing to highlight, you'll notice down here, it's kind of like a elephant in the room, which is time lost diamond against the darkness. This is a really crappy one. It's like 3 divs, 4 divs, and I keep saying it's crappy because, you know, relative to what I'm putting into this guy, 3 or 4 divs is nothing compared to like a 20 div belt, or like, you know, this one that cost me a couple divs, you know, so on and so forth. But like, you know, relative to what the type of pricing of money you put into this, you know, this is a relatively cheap time lost diamond jewel with 4% increased strength and whatever you want on the next one. Ideally you want like int percentage or dex percentage here. They're really pricey. They're like 50 divs, 60 divs, what have you. But that's sort of like my next upgrade for this character, is to change this. But this is a fantastic place to put it because you're already going for polymath. You're already going for jack of all trades to get more damage. You might as well spend 5-6 points to get 8% more of the attributes that you're getting here. So I really value this area a lot for this time lost jewel, and I highly recommend anybody who's playing a stacker to see if they can invest their points into this area, because that gives you 8% for free. I did anoint spaghettification. It was an expensive anoint. It was 2 divs for the first, I think the isolation's like 2 divs, but I was utilizing Titanic here. This is super cheap to use while you're leveling and while you're doing stuff. I put spaghettification because I'm probably not getting an Astramentis on this build, so I kind of just decided on my Astramentis at home necklace and just decided that's going to be it for me. But yeah, let's just go over my items, right? So speaking of my necklace, this is my Astramentis at home. It's got all attributes, strength and int on it. Just want to make sure you get as much in particular attributes as possible. It's also a dexterity jade amulet, so I get a little bit of dex off of it. You want to make sure that you have the primary, these are like the primary stars of the show, right? Hand of Wisdom in action, as well as a Pillar of the Cage God. Pillar of the Cage God sets up the build. I got a 12% increased weapon damage one here per 5 strength. I found that to be more impactful for me than an attack speed one. When you're starting out, you shouldn't get a 12% increased weapon damage one. You should get one that has a corruption for flat damage, as well as you can socket runes inside of it for more flat damage. And that's because you don't have the flat damage without the HOAs, and even with the HOAs, your int is not going to be that high. Well, my int wasn't that high to be able to sort of like really benefit from penetration here until I started scaling my int. So that's how I started the build. I started the build with a flat damage pillar, and then I transitioned to getting this 12% one with the elemental resist penetration. Once you start getting a lot of flat int for your lightning damage, you want to switch your runes to elemental penetration resists because that allows you to do more damage. It feels like it does more damage. The attack speed one, I don't know if it's worth it. I had one, I resold it relatively quickly as I was playing between these two, the 12% and the attack speed one. I don't know if it's worth the money. Some people may argue it is, but I went with a 12% increased weapon damage for 5 strength because at the end of the day, I am somewhat still strength stacking. The Black Sun Crest Great Helmet is a really good helmet to have. You'll notice I went for the corruption of regenerate life on it because I want my regen to be pretty strong for me, as well as it keeps me sustained with my attacks that I'm going to do. The Mortis Invictus chest piece is like the de facto attribute chest piece. You can get a 4-socketed or 5-socketed. You want to ideally get the 4-socket one first. You want to focus on maximum life as well as attributes. And then when you can, upgrade from the 4-socket to the 5-socket. I put Chaos Res in here. I still value Chaos Res. I know a lot of attribute stackers don't value Chaos Res. They value getting rid of a resist in their rings to then put just resist everywhere else. Like they put like 25 all res here. They put all res here, all res here, all res here to not bother with Chaos Res. I still value Chaos Res because at the end of the day, I want to play this. I want to be this character still be somewhat defensive. So instead of putting particular resistances here, I mean not resistances, attributes here on my rings for my ingenuity belt, I still prioritize resistances here. You'll notice this one has still priority of resistances. Doesn't really have high strength. I could probably upgrade this if I really wanted to. This one has int and resistances. I got away with this because I was able to get a lot of cold res here, so focus my fire res and lightning res elsewhere. If I take this ring off, for instance, I'm at -3 cold res, and that's no bueno. Same thing with this one here. This one puts me at 84, 60, and 58. So this one is not as impactful towards my resistances like this one, and this is the reason why I can't really do like a strength int dex ring. I wish I could, but I really can't. Other attributes you want to get on your rings, honestly, is flat damage. Flat damage is king for this particular build because it has such a low weapon damage on the Pillar of Cage Guard. You want to add as much flat damage as possible. Your boots is where you're going to fill out your resists. You want to try to get as high resist as possible, as well as strength and movement speed. Everything else is a gimme. And then for my belt, I was using a strength belt. You could use a Magnor's belt as well. Hold on, let me find it. You could use one of these Magnor's girdle belts. There was one that I had. I don't know where it is exactly. Somewhere here. That had a corruption on it for lightning res, just so it can help with your res. But you could utilize this. I utilized a rare one with +30 strength with some resistances when I was having resistance problems when it came to the build. But ultimately, that is the item selection here. I want to make sure that my amulet didn't have any resistance on it. I had this amulet previously, the Crimson Amulet, that gave me resistances because again, I was having resistance problems at the time. I didn't have really good rings, and I had allocated Titanic on it. But I wanted to make the build sort of future-proof that ultimately, if I did ever find an Astramentis, God forbid, one of my chance orbs actually turns a Stellar Amulet one of these days into an Astramentis, I can just slot it into the build without having to worry about my resists. So that's how going over the passive tree as well as my item selections. let's go over the gems. So first off the bat, don't worry about all these gems. All you have to worry about is Ice Strike, Tempest Bell, Herald of Ice, Charge Staff, Combat Frenzy, Hand of Chayula, maybe Frostbomb. Everything else is just me trying to get my maximum resist, and that's just me plopping in different colors so I can get to the maximum resist that I want for each one of those resists. Well, let's go over the moves themselves, right? Ice Strike, I'm utilizing Martial Tempo, Primal Armament, Concentration, Ice Bite, as well as Heft. I want to make this as hard hitting as possible because it is my main damage move. I'm utilizing it to do damage on top of the Charge Staff, Truckers, and being sent out. Tempest Bell is what I utilize when I do 4 combos with my Ice Strike. Tempest Bell is busted. Ultimately, this is probably getting nerfed next patch, but pretty much what you do is you keep attacking the enemy until you get a 4 here for Tempest Bell. You drop Tempest Bell, it generates all this shockwave around it that does a tremendous amount of damage, and you destroy mobs with it. In the Tempest Bell, I use Overpower, Ruthless, Overabundance, Immolation, as well as Lightning Pen. Overpower and Ruthless are utilized to build stun. You'll notice in a lot of my clips here, my Pinnacle bosses get stunned relatively quickly. That's due to me dropping Tempest Bell like 24/7. Overabundance allows me to do the Tempest Bell again when it came to like having a charge up, so I don't have to wait for it. I can just immediately do it as soon as the cooldown is done. But it does have a less skill effect duration. I don't care about keeping it up. I just want to keep dropping it to keep hitting it. Immolation allows me to gain more damage than just a fire damage when I hit the bell with my fire damage. You'll notice my rings have add fire damage to attacks. So when I hit the bell and it creates fire damage off of it, it can't ignite, but it does extra damage to ignite enemies around it. So it's just like extra 30% damage. Really nice. And then it also has lightning penetration to be able to penetrate off of my Charge Staff. Frostbomb is pretty basic. Strip Away, Second Wind, Arcane Tempo, Fountain of Rage. Just there to put down for less resistances against Ice Strike, and then I can get Rage as I'm doing it. Herald of Ice is how I clear in maps. Herald of Ice is kind of bonkers when it comes to clear, especially with ice moves. You're looking at Magnifying Effect, Cold Mastery, Cold Infusion, Cold Penetration, Elemental Focus. Charge Staff is how we get lightning damage incorporated into the build, and it's how we're utilizing power charges from our resonance here, and Combat Frenzy to generate those power charges, right? In Charge Staff, we have Persistence, Perpetual Charge, Cold Exposure, Lightning Exposure, and Innervate. This is just adding us a shockwave that you see all of our stat stacker, attribute stackers use, and just shooting it forward like a blue wave, right? It converts 80% of our fizz damage to lightning damage, and then that lightning damage just scales to more lightning damage from Hoa. Combat Frenzy, all you really care about is Proficient. All this other stuff, just for max res for me. I did Clarity, Vitality, and Precision for it. I mean, I don't really need Clarity because I don't use mana, but like I said, it's only there for the maximum resist. Hand of Chayula, I'm using like Hyperthermia here with a heightened curse. Honestly, you don't really need to use Hyperthermia here. You can put a mark here. You can put a mark and a curse here. Ultimately, I probably could drop one of these red jewels because my fire resist is already at 85. And I don't think dropping one of these guys is gonna hurt. And I can put a like freeze mark here alongside Hyperthermia to actually apply at the same time. I just kind of busted with Hand of Chayula, honestly. Surprised it can actually apply both a curse and a mark. So it applies them both to the character. Maybe that's not an interaction they're interested in. But I put Hyperthermia here just to lower their cold res, so it makes it easier for me to build a freeze build up, especially on Pinnacle bosses. After that, everything else, as I mentioned, is just for maximum resist. But yeah, that's my character. I've been playing him since he's probably like my 3rd character I made in the league, and I've been slowly adding currency to him as I've been playing other characters because he is what I would be my de facto bosser, and I've been having a lot of fun with him. If you have any questions, comments, or concerns, you can always like, comment, subscribe on the video, and I'm probably going to be putting up a Momolytics guide around this as well, and we'll hope to see you in the next video where I make probably another mapper. Take care now.